Third phase of Moon. Third phase.
Welcome back, Third Phase of Moon. Blake Cousins, we have a special for you. If you want to hear about the Secret Space Force program and the man behind it, well, Corey Goode and David Wilcock have a great discussion in regards to his visitation to the moon and back. Is this possible? Did this really happen? Well, you're going to hear it from the insiders themselves. Listen up, an open forum. We're doing it right now. Listen up.
So one thing I just want to point out here, in case some of you do not know Corey's tale, what we're dealing with is the Roswell crash happens and other things like it. The military-industrial complex gets UFO technology, they colonize our solar system, but then they build a second space program that we're calling the MIC program, and those guys only get to stay in the solar system. They don't think ETs exist. Sigmund was a member of that group. Corey was a member of a group that actually was interplanetary, interstellar, and was going outside of our solar system as well as within it. So they have tried. These people were clever enough to come up with two programs so that they could disclose one eventually and hide the other one. Sigmund was the main guy that they were going to use to disclose that partial program. But then this whole drama took place where Sigmund ends up finding out from Corey that the bigger program does exist by doing things like hair analysis and things like that.
So I was told to go to a specified location at a certain time, and I was going to be picked up by the same type of craft that was picking me up before, a triangular craft that fit two people in the front, the crew, and then had 3 seats in the back for passengers. It's about the size of an SUV, or a little bit bigger. I sat in my car for a while. It wasn't a location I'd gone to before. And at some point, I see a white ball or orb in the sky, and it's moving around, and it came closer, and then the orb got bigger and bigger, and it looked like a sphere of light, and then it popped like a bubble you would blow, and there was the triangular craft, the dark craft. So I was picked up, and very quickly we were at the moon. The moon went from being, real small to it grew real quickly, and then we were not far from the surface. And then we angled back around to that 10 o'clock position on the back of on the dark side of the moon, and we flew over a crater, and it was the crater that I knew that the Lunar Operation Command was in, but we couldn't see any buildings. It had the technological masking up that created a kind of a mirage effect, and that mirage effect somehow reflected back. I don't know exactly how it worked, but it prevented you from seeing the Lunar Operation Command. So back when I first saw the Lunar Operation Command and served in the 20 and back program, the Lunar Operation Command looked like a swastika because it was a part of a Nazi space program from the 30s and 40s. So they had built it out to break up the look of the swastika, which made a lot of the people that served there more comfortable. And then there was also a hole basically a hole in the middle of the crater that went down into a cavern area. And what it was explained to me later on, what had happened is that when meteors hit the moon, at some point the moon pushes back, and the energy goes this way, and it compresses, I guess we'll call it the crust of the moon, and then it expands again, leaving cracks and rifts. And also, the energy would melt it and turn it into lava. And that's where they would get these huge lava tubes because of the lack of pressure and gravity. And in those tubes, they were building out more of the Lunar Operation Command. And when we flew when we flew in through that hole, you see the part of the base that is below ground, I guess you'll say. And it's the part I've described as a bell, kind of a bell-shaped, where craft go in and out. One was an entrance bay, one was an exit bay, and when you fly in, there are the areas where they landed the craft, the pilots got out, and then the ground crew came out and just pushed it. It was floating above the ground, just pushed it into a conveyor system that then moved it and placed it in a designated spot. It's pretty interesting. And of course, I was greeted by Gonzalez, and he showed up wearing the Air Force dress blues. And this is after pretty much everyone, especially in the programs, knew that he had been presenting himself as Lieutenant Colonel Gonzalez, and then I found out when he was outed that he was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, but he was pretending to be Air Force. So I walked up to him and I said, "So we're back, to this ruse again," kind of a thing, and he, tightened up and kind of freaked out a little bit, basically telling me to shut up. So.
And by the way, Gonzalez was the first person with the SSP Alliance that he met with when he first went up there, right after he finished briefing me on all this stuff in 2015. So Gonzalez is one of the long characters in the whole saga.
Right. So we went down a few flights of stairs and into a smaller elevator. And we were met by a young female. She was dressed in the same type of Air Force dress uniform. She had her hair up under a hat. And she greeted us, and she stated that she was going to be our escort for the remainder of our visit. And she had all of the clearance to take us down another elevator, and then she ran a card and placed her hand under some sort of a reader, and the elevator started going down very quickly. So much that usually Gonzalez always tried to get me to do a count, try to judge how fast the elevator's going, so they could do the calculations to figure, when you walk down a hallway, count how many steps it is. And he was better at doing that kind of stuff than I was. But there was no way to count how many floors we went down.
Right.
So I had skipped ahead earlier. We were taken to a conference room, and I was brought in. There were a handful of people who I recognized that were a part of the SSP Alliance and had been in previous meetings. And of course, this is an image that we had our graphic novel artist do for us, and this is very close to what Sigmund looks like. He has, interestingly enough, a guy I grew up with had a scar on his cheek from water skiing accident, and he had almost exactly the same scar on his cheekbone. Right, and when I mentioned that I had reported that he was possibly infiltrating, he jumped up and started screaming at me that he had lost everything, and he looked at me and said, "Intuitive empath my ass."
Which had been Corey's job description when he
Right.
was in the space program.
So Gonzalez then gave a detailed and classified report about his series of meetings and work with other beings through this Mayan group. And it was pretty interesting. It mostly had to do with them doing their psychological and spiritual healing on a lot of traumatized beings. Now, Sigmund doesn't believe that the Blue Avians are real. He saw a video of the Lunar Operation Command, the first meeting, when the Blue Avians appeared and they had video of them, but he said that there's technology out there to make you see whatever you want. And it was kind of strange. He said that he was fairly sure that the Nordics were screwing with our heads again. And before I could find out what he meant by again, the subject got changed. But apparently this Nordic group has been assisting us for hundreds of years, and they even helped us form the United States. And of course, I gave a briefing of the meetings that I had with the Anshar at the Super Federation and at the council at Saturn. And I ended up spending 3 days with the Anshar in their city with RE's family. And that was quite a report, too. Oh, already covered that.
And there's our sneaky little guy hiding in the corner.
Hiding in the background.
Which we've heard, you know, there were multiple reports at the signing of the Declaration of Independence of a Nordic-looking being there that they called Saint Germain, who somehow materialized inside the room after they locked themselves inside, knew all the secret Masonic handshakes and everything, which he could just pull out of their heads telepathically, and told everybody there, you have to sign the Declaration, you have to do this. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So the military-industrial complex secret space program is made up primarily of the Air Force and the Defense Intelligence Agency. And I've talked in the past about how they have slightly more advanced space stations in the IIS that are serviced by these triangular craft that we see all the time, that we call the Tier 3Bs, but they're more advanced. They're electrogravitic craft that they go back and forth and they ferry astronauts and supplies. Now, during, of course, President Reagan's time, Star Wars, we had put up quite a few space-based weapons platforms, one of which was the Rod of God. And they're telephone-sized tungsten poles that were coated with ceramic and had basically the tail section of a JDAM bomb that used GPS to guide it in. And it was a kinetic weapon that was just dropped from space, and I guess the kinetic energy released a lot of energy similar to a nuclear bomb, but no radiation. What is being discussed is that the United States wants to declassify this secret space program out of a place of strength. And doing so, they planned on using some of these space-based weapons and exotic craft to take out North Korea. So,
which is trying to nuke us. So I know a lot of people have been upset about that, and we've talked about this. Mm-hmm. But there really are elements of the cabal using this as a proxy state. That warning that we heard about in Hawaii might not have just been a warning. There are reports that they did, in fact, shoot a missile down that was coming in.
Right. Right.
And then covered it up.
Yes, it was all a setup for a false flag and to begin that war, but in a different way. So, Tom DeLonge and his effort was discussed a little bit, and how the military-industrial complex, some of them are behind it. Now, of course, this meeting happened, before some more recent incidences.
When we found out that it's a Mylar balloon that they were showing as the picture of the UFO they had, and then raised $2.2 million on a Mylar balloon that's cost $6. That's a great return on investment, as I said in my article.
People give us crap for raising money.
Really?
Yeah.
And this is nothing.
Right.
What we've done,
Mylar
nothing
balloon.
compared to that. And we're for real. I mean, we're trying to tell you guys the truth here.
Effort was being backed by the Air Force space program, and that they wanted to use this possibly as an avenue of disclosure, but they did not want to go through the UFO community because the UFO community, they thought, had lost its legitimacy, that we were all, infighting, and we have all of our, issues, which is true to a certain extent.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
And they didn't. They said that they didn't want to associate, their disclosure of a serious space program with people that were talking about visiting with 8-foot-tall blue birds. I didn't think that was going to be a good mix.
Well, but we're going to do it out from under them. That's the point.
That's right.
And that's what we're doing right now.
Sigmund himself said that he had helped infiltrate and pull disinformation operations in ufology back when he was a part of this program. It was a part of hiding the secret space program by making everyone think that it was aliens, or speculating it was aliens. So they helped create, I guess, the giggle factor with talking about aliens by some of their manipulations. But, they said that we had also been infiltrated by an Illuminati order that was trying to bring their alien god religion to us so that we would adopt it at a certain point fairly readily after they started disclosing things like Antarctica, that there was an ancient civilization there, and there were some under the ocean, and they were going to disclose that, hey, we're related to these people, so we have a divine right of kings. It was all, it was all supposed to play in together. And of course, our egos have gotten in the way, and we've turned religions out of everything ufology.
So just the thing about the outer barrier real quick was, it was, I guess, in 2013, right, that the outer barrier formed?
Right.
Or no, it was
No, it was after that.
It was 2015.
15.
Yeah. 2014, end of 2014, that's what it was.
And it says, it says Gonzalez, but it should be Sigmund.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Sigmund said that he led an expedition to a craft, and they wanted to find out who it belonged to. And he said, wait till you find out, hear what we found. And then after the docking, you see astronauts that were going through some holes in this metallic-like dome. The whole ship was carved out of stone. It was probably a meteor that had been cleaned up, hollowed out, and then built out on the inside. And there was a dome on top that was kind of a crystalline. It was crystalline, but it was hard like metal. And it was shattered. It had holes in it from many, many collisions over eons of time. And what they found was that this was one of the ancient builder race ships. Is this the animation? Is it moving?
Yep.
No, it's moving. So this is sort of a mock-up of what we were able to see. And the dome was about a third of the way down what I perceived as the front. It's coming in. Now, excuse me. On the outside, there was a coating of ice. And it looked like frozen, frothy lake water. And there was orangish red stuff in, like cloudy material frozen within it. Now, after the astronauts shimmied down through one of the holes, we have a scene. They had kind of like GoPro cams on their suits. Now, and they had flashlights on their wrists and on their helmets and on their chests as well. And they were going through the inside of this craft that had zero gravity and was obviously very ancient. And they started commenting that obviously it had been picked over many times by different ET races over the thousands of years who happened to find it, land on it, pick off, some technological materials.
And let's point out also that you were getting this briefing on December 16th, just 5 days after NASA had actually announced this and said that it might be an interstellar craft, because they're telling you there's a cigar-shaped aircraft in our solar system, but they're not revealing yet that they have a space program that's secret where they could go out and take a look at it. So we're getting this really valuable intel right now.
So there were a lot of panels removed from the walls, empty cabinets. It had obviously been stripped. Now, at one point, we hear one of the men state that I found something, please, not please, but, vector into my location. And then the point of view that we had was someone that received the message and started going through the floors. There were holes in the floors and they were weightless, so they're pushing their way through open floor sections to get to the correct level. And when they did, they found they were able to get into a room that you couldn't hardly see because one of the panels had kind of lodged in the way and you couldn't see the door. And when they went inside and the light spread out, you could see a kind of a semi-curved room, concave, and there were drawers like a morgue, but they were large. And they had already pulled 2 of them open, and there were old dead bodies on these tables that came out. And one of them looked kind of like a pterodactyl. It was bird-like, and it was very light blue, almost white, and obviously had been in there a long time. The other one they pulled out, at first I thought was a type of mammal, but when we looked closer, it was obviously it had been some sort of an aquatic being. And it had kind of a short torso, but its arms and legs were like tentacles. No bones, they were just like tentacles. And at the end of the leg tentacles and arm tentacles were 3 more tentacle extensions. Very similar to the triangle.
Well, yeah, this is one of those weird things where, in case you guys haven't seen where this is going, the craft that he goes into appears to be an original remnant of the Ra civilization, of the civilization that 2.6 billion years ago originated on Venus, conquered several, or colonized at least, several neighboring stars, and now is the Blue Avian race. And all of their records have been wiped out, but what we're seeing is, finally, we have a craft where the handwriting wasn't scratched off. He's going to get to that in a minute, allowing us to analyze what it says. And this is so profound because now we're coming up to this big solar flash, this idea of ascension, which the pyramid timeline talks about, which the Blue Avians have been talking about. All of this stuff is interrelated. It's like the ancient past, the beginning of how this all started, the people that are contacting Corey now. We're now getting to see their technology in a way we never have before, including the bodies. And so this tentacly being looks a lot like the Golden Triangle head being that Corey saw when he was at the LOC for the first time. So that's probably the same being, but, many, many, many millions of years more evolved in the future.
Right. So one of them was still pulling open the drawers, looking, and there were other bodies in, but I didn't get a good look at them. The one camera was focused on them trying to retrieve the bodies, and they had these big bags, orange bags, that they were trying to put the body in, and the minute they touched it, it basically broke up into tiny little pieces. It was like freeze-dried. And so pieces started going everywhere because there was 0 gravity, and the light is reflecting off of each little particle in the camera shot. So the the next thing you see is a guy, you can't see for a few minutes because it's everywhere, and then you see a guy using one of the panels from the wall as like a spatula trying to scrape the being off of the table that it was stuck to. They got it out in chunks and put it in the bags, but they retrieved the bodies, and they were going, I hadn't heard any results, but they were going to cross-reference the genetic material, organic material found in the ice sludge with that of the freeze-dried bodies to see if, make sure they were the former crew. So the organics, they were able to get some preliminary dates back to a little under 1 billion years old. And they were able to track the trajectory of the craft to the star, which they told me, and I forgot, that it was in orbit for 1 billion years or so. So another part of the expedition called out that they had found something interesting, and once again the camera goes through different floors, and you end up in a kind of a different looking area where this the floor and ceiling's a little bit higher, a little bit more of a distance between them, and on every wall, every ceiling, and every floor are all of these glyphs, and some of them are real wispy and stylized. And they said that that was a hyperdimensional mathematics and language that was mixed. You couldn't separate their math from their language, but and they weren't quite able to fully figure out, you know, the translations. But the others, the second type of glyphs were dashes, smaller dashes, dots. And it was almost like a computer language type language. And they stated that they had found similar writing on Earth and on planets, on excavations they'd done to other planets. And they were able to start deciphering the writings on the walls, which was more exciting to them than if they had found technology. So, I mean, right now they are finding out quite a lot about the ancient builder race, and I can't wait to go to that briefing.
Well, and just the gadgets that we're going to be able to pull out of this ship also could be really amazing.
Right, but there wasn't a whole lot. It was mostly picked over. But this is the first time we had any type of writing or glyphs from the ancient builder race. Keep getting ahead of the slides.
Well, you didn't really say that it was also, the language was also found in other stars nearby.
Oh, right. In other stars close by where they had found ancient builder race ruins, you know, they had found, I guess, later civilizations that had writings that were similar. It was not exactly the same, but enough to where they had like a Rosetta Stone. Now, at the end of this, Sigmund told me that we were going to go on a tour of the LOC Bravo. Now, one of the things I've kept quiet over the years is that there's not just one Lunar Operation Command. There's 3. There's LOC Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. I've, at this point, had really only been to Alpha, and that's the one I described to you that looked like the swastika. The others were mostly below ground. We were, don't want to get a hell. We got into another elevator and rode it down, and then got into a long, skinny shuttle that held everyone present. We came out in another large cavern on the other side of that bell-shaped area that I had showed you, and we began flying close to, it was inside a lava tube, traveling. It was on the other side of the moon, and we were traveling, basically, if you're looking at the moon, if you look back around at the 10 o'clock position, we had gone into the inside of the moon through the crack that I had talked about, the hole, but now we were traveling along this way, along the curvature of the moon, coming more towards the front of the moon. And that's when I saw, not only on our way to LOC Bravo, we started seeing giant, basically tractors that were broken and looked like kind of like an excavation site where like a tractor broke and they just kind of pushed it to the side and kept going. Oh, okay. So it was a small facility on the ground. There was sort of another hole similar to what we flew into, but more oval, and then there were radiating out more buildings that looked more like what you would see depicted as on the surface of the moon, kind of, curved, long, elongated buildings that looked like they were raised by filling them with air. So we saw, this is the first time that I'd seen this, men and women walking around that actually had NASA symbols on their clothing. Until this point, I didn't think NASA was really aware of everything that was going on in the Lunar Operation Command, but at some level they were involved because these people were there studying ancient ruins. We were greeted by a few of the egghead types, and they helped us get suited up in environmental suits, learn how the respirators, how everything worked, how the safety mechanisms worked, and then they took us down to what they called the Great Hall, which was where most of the artifacts were. And I tell you, it was very much like walking up on a scene from the movie Prometheus. There were ancient, large chairs and seats. Some of them actually had bodies in them, ancient bodies in them. And the PhD, it was interesting. He was sitting there, and Sigmund was trying to be in the limelight as much as he could. The guy stated that soon I will be given this same tour to a major television network. And he said, won't that be something? But until now, you are getting the tour, and you have to keep the bulk of it secret. And
Right.
It was a 5-hour tour, and at this point, I can only share just a very little. But when I'm able to share more, it's going to be very cool, because some of your insiders, I think, have had this tour prior.
It seems like it. And
Right.
you had never even mentioned before about giant chairs with giant bodies in them. That's new information for me.
Right.
But it fits with the people that were on Mars and blew up the planet that became the asteroid
Right.
belt in our solar system, where it's like 70-foot tall humanoids.
Yeah, they weren't that big.
Or
But
the 35-foot type, you think?
they weren't that big either.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But and all along the floor, as if it was almost like a part of a track at some period, were shattered what looked like I-beams that were made of that crystalline metallic material.
Right, and if you've seen a lot of the other videos I've done on YouTube, you'll know that there are all these different domes and obelisks and cool structures of this crystalline material that we found all over our solar system, on the moon, in all different places.
And these huge tunnels went off in all these different directions, lava-type tubes, and all along them were artifacts. Mostly random things that would be used in building, nothing real exciting. Well, I guess that's, pretty exciting, but, no real eye candy other than that. And then I was talking with Gonzalez, and I asked him, have you ever seen anything like this? And I was told, you have been here before, you just don't remember. And apparently in my third 20 and back, the one that I have very little memory of, I was helping expeditionary teams go through and catalog everything they were finding. I had no memory of it.
And for those who don't know, we have actually multiple insiders who've talked about this, the idea that there is a program where they will take you out to work for 20 years in space. They have time travel capability, which they got from extraterrestrials. They bring you back to the time you left, and then they age regress your body. So you get dialed back to the age you were when you left, and then they block out that 20 years of your memory as much as they can and try to splice it together so you don't remember leaving. So apparently some people are having this happen to them, and Corey is one of the very few who, like 3%, I think,
3 to 5%,
that actually get total recall where they remember what they did. So he's had 3 of these 20 and back tours, which technically makes you like 106 years old.
Okay, so I went on a tour that I had apparently been on prior. You're right that we didn't even talk about this recently on Cosmic. We were taken on a small train system, a very small train system that looked like it was built for tours. I mean, it was obviously built to take you around different areas. It's very cool. The tracks went all around these different structures that had been just shadowed by some sort of a concussion wave. And at the end of the tour, we went back. We were allowed to shower because we were just soaking wet from wearing the environmental suits. We put on the clothes that we had arrived in, and Gonzalez and I were sent to back to different destinations.
And you thought you were going home.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened.
Actually...
Or did you go home that time?
Yeah, I went home that time.
Oh, okay.
So, overall, when I was giving a briefing to the SSP Alliance, I was giving them information about some of these major meetings I had gone to, including the Super Federation, where a major milestone was met, where human beings have developed to a point to where we are not going to have ETs pretending to be gods coming in and manipulating our DNA and our spiritual development. From here on out, we have developed to a point to where we take over our own management.
We want to thank everybody from around the world who joined us in this episode, this live premiere. We want to thank everybody in the chat tonight, the super chats. It's been incredible this last week. It's been our pleasure bringing it to you as it comes in. And I want to get your thoughts. What do you guys think of David Wilcock and Corey Goode's friendship? Could Corey Goode be the man he says he is? He claims a lot. Is he telling us the truth? Is this a possibility? These are questions we want to know. We're going to be finding out a little bit more. We're going to be working on a documentary with David in the future, including some more updates from Corey Goode himself. Stand by, everybody. We've got some UFO sightings coming in. It's going to be an exciting month. Stay tuned. Hit that thumbs up and that notification bell to make sure you get notified when we do these live premieres. Subscribe, everybody, and be safe out there. Blake Cousins, we'll see you real soon.